Hello. Today I want to talk about dragons. My name is Carl, also known as Zarepath in the custom magic community, and I've been doing a lot of reviews of official Wizards of the Coast magic sets lately. But I've been working a lot on my own custom magic projects, and I want to do a quick video showing some cards I've been designing for my latest set, Karsus. And I wanted to make 30 dragon designs. Uh, First, real quick, I'm going to back up, talk about what Karsus is. So, Karsus is a crystal world. Came up with that aesthetic before Ikoria came out. So, a little unfortunate overlap there. And it um, also has alternate reality. So, this was a plane that was shattered into pieces. I think Karsus is the name of a plane escape card, one of the planes on one of those cards. And it was a setting used for a design a draft event in the custom magic community. I really liked the cards and mechanics. I came up with it and started working on the set. So why am I talking about dragons in this crystal world? Let me just real quick show you the mechanics. The main one is crystallize, which we can see here on Splinters here. Basically, it's like that mechanic from Kaladesh, which you choose a counter on the creature or you get a 1/1. And that wasn't, it was usually obvious which one you were supposed to do. This mechanic is based on that, where you put a +1/+1 counter on any creature, a little more modality there, or you get a treasure token. I was really excited to see Rapacious Dragon from Wizards M20, I think it was, which just called out treasure in the rules text and defined it in reminder text. So that made it a little easier to make this a keyword here. So this is a set that has lots of treasure, lots of ramping, lots of colors. And you know who loves treasure? Dragons of all 5 colors. So we're going a little bit Tarkir here, but the dragons are very different than the dragons of Tarkir. They're more obsessed with treasure. They're less obsessed with ruling over humans. They just love collecting treasure, hoarding it. They're more wild and primal, um, and they have the aesthetic of lots of crystals and things on. So I showed you crystallize. There's dragon sub themes and teamer colors, but also dragons in each color at uncommon and rare. And I was thinking, if this is a multicolored set, you can see down here I've got lots of multicolored commons because of the fixing that treasure can provide you from the crystallized mechanic. It would be interesting to try a super cycle, or not a super cycle, but a 10 card cycle of 2-color dragons. Now, these would probably be rare. I'm not the best at making 2-color design, something I realized from Great Designer Search 3, where I got to uh, the card design trial and I just did not make very good cards. So the approach I took was something I'm borrowing from Ruben Covington, who I respect a lot. And his approach, a lot of times when trying to come up with a card design, is he'll shoot 3 different approaches and then see which one fits best and maybe explore that one further. So, without further ado, I want to show you guys some dragons. Now, I say 30 dragons because there's 10 different 2-color pairings, and I decided to do 3 completely different designs for each one. Just kind of the shotgun approach. I would love any feedback on these. These are mostly rough sketches of ideas. The ones that I was most interested in, I spent a little bit more time developing and fine tuning because I felt it had promise. But basically, the way I did this was I decided, well, with multicolor designs, there's kind of 3 basic ways you can approach. You can do a Chinese menu approach where you pick a little from one color and a little from another and you put them on a card. You can do the Venn diagram approach where you focus only on what both colors do, design something on that, maybe extra strong or a little bit pushed. And then the third approach I decided to try something that's brand new that hasn't really been seen before in all of Magic, or at least this implementation and deciding what color pair it fits best, or doing that for a color pair that seems to fit it well. So um, I decided to kind of step back from the set themes. So each color pairing has a different theme, kind of like signpost archetype, draft uncommons will often indicate. Sets usually have different themes for colors and what they're doing, but I want the dragons to be a little splashier to kind of stand out. That's an additional rule I gave myself, is try and make these cards that stand out on their own and don't immediately show off the set skeleton. You can't see the set skeleton poking through the skin when you look at the card. And then my other constraint was something from all of Karsus, where I really want players to feel like they have agency to exert their own choices on how they play the game. They can build the kinds of decks they want to play. They can strategies they want to do. So there's a kind of a limitation, feel bad interaction, and like blowing out and punishing people trying to do funner things, which is something Magic generally tries to do anyway. But I'm really trying to push that. So not a lot of hate bear type stuff going on here. Not surgical extraction and aggressive discard, land destruction, those kinds of things. Anyway, with all that said, we have 30 dragons to talk about. First, just because of the way the MSE is set up, this decided that black-green was the first color pair. This is Chinese menu. I just thought, okay, so what are some effects that are only in green and black that might pair interestingly? I thought of the unicorn effect from Prized Unicorn in green. I guess it's also called Lure. And mixing that with an effect that's kind of iconic for classic Magic vampires, which is the Sanger Vampire effect. But it often is just kind of a poor design, because how often will an opponent not only chump something, but also do it when it gives them an additional benefit of growing the vampire even larger? On top of that, the Sanger Vampire has evasion, so it's even more difficult to chump something that has evasion. So it was kind of a weird design effect. And I think it was on a 3/3. Anyway, I decided, well, this is interesting. I can force them to block with the unicorn ability. And if I can somehow get this thing to survive, luring every single blocker to block it, it gets bonuses. Now, one way to make it so that it doesn't just die to their whole board, is this has native evasion, which means that what this really says is all creatures with flying able to. So if they have like a couple bird tokens or something like that, they're forced to block, and then you can kind of get this. The Death Touch, I don't think plays super well with it. Like, this is for when you have a bunch of dragons and you're like, okay, well, kill all your dragons, or 4 of them at least. I don't think this is a great execution. I don't think unicorn design on something with evasion is very good, because the point of unicorn designs is to give evasion to other things. Kind of a weird inversion there. And this maybe isn't the best pairing, because if you're forcing everything to block, it's less likely that this can survive combat. So a rough draft idea, but that's kind of where my mind is going. So that's Dragon 1. Dragon 2, black-green color pair. I was like, all right, what do black and green both do, both care about? Obviously, the graveyard. I thought, okay, let's just have it, just count the number of cards in your graveyard and be that big, because that is often a big number. That feels kind of dragon-like. And then have a downside of you have to sacrifice a permanent or else it gets tapped. There are some themes in Karsus that care about tapped and untapped, and there's also permanents that can be recast from the graveyard. So sacrificing permanents kind of works well. Also, we have treasure tokens that are permanents sacrificed. Those treasure tokens coming from Crystallize, and so I thought this was a pretty good design. As I was doing it, I realized, oh, this is basically just Apocalypse Demon from Amonkhet, except that costs 7 mana, I believe, and you had to sacrifice a creature. But again, because we're pairing two colors here, harder to cast. thought maybe could be pushed. It's a little too iterative when you look at Apocalypse Demon, so probably not the best one. Okay, third dragon, dragon number 3. I wanted to try something new that's been done before in Magic. In this case, what are ways we could use the graveyard differently? I felt like that's something that Black Green would natural space for. And tapping lands graveyard. The idea here was, what if your graveyard somehow became a domain of this dragon? Like, it didn't just rule the battlefield, it ruled the graveyard, and what would that look like? And I thought, well, what if you could, you have your lands for casting things from the battlefield, and you have your lands for casting things from the graveyard. I think the rules wouldn't be too difficult to implement here. It probably depends a lot on designs. Like, I'm sure this breaks something somewhere, but it was kind of a fun idea to explore. I don't have I have one mechanic that's explicitly a graveyard mechanic. It's basically aftermath for creatures, where when the creature dies, you can cast the backside from the graveyard. But it's not a huge mechanic in the set, so I don't know that this will work. Like, it's fairly parasitic. You need to have things that you can cast or activate in the graveyard for this to work. But I think this is an interesting space. Maybe it's not great for black-green dragon in this set. Maybe that doesn't make this a splashy card. It makes it more of a build around, which makes maybe this enchantment. But that's dragon number 3. So those are the 3 black-green dragons. Let me know in the comments best, or any tweaks or ideas for those. So now we go to black-red. This is a card that is inspired by a card from Fallen Empire, from Alliances. Very old Magic set. Mark Rosewater said once that designers should look at the Alliances set and take note of all the innovation and good design ideas that came out of it. A lot of the ideas of Alliances inspired and changed Magic for the better for years. It was a set he was always very impressed by. And one of the cards that I found interesting in it was a red creature that, when it attacked, you flipped a coin, and depending on how the coin flipped, the creature would behave in a different way. And at the same time, around the same time, I should say, we had a new Chandra with a +1 ability that was, I think, is the Flame of Kaladesh or something. The 4-mana 1. She came out in Kaladesh. And the +1 was exile the top card of your library. You may play it. If you don't, Chandra deals 2 damage to any opponent. And it looks a little clunky, but the play is really good. The problem with red exile draw is you can't always play the card, and then it goes away, and that feels bad. However, if you know you can't play it or cast it, you can at least deal 2 damage to an opponent, which is something that red always likes. And it also adds some modality to it. Some instances where, okay, I kind of want to play this, but it might actually be correct to not play it and deal 2 damage to it. It introduces a little bit of agency to the player, while also solving a drawback, feel bad mechanic in a very red way. And I liked that a lot. Anyway, my point is, I liked this space of exiling the top card of your library. You may cast it, but if you don't, something else happens. And yeah, so that's this. When this dragon attacks, you can exile the top card of your library. You can use it for card advantage, or you can use this thing double strike. So I wanted a trigger that affected the way it's attacking, since this is attack trigger. And I have this to make it feel a little bit black, because this could kind of be a mono red design. This is kind of a shade fire breathing, so red would just be +1/+0. Black shades gives +1/+1. So together, let's give it +1/+1. Pairing with double strike can be very powerful, particularly if you either use your mana to cast the card from your library. If not, that mana to pump this thing. So it might be way too swingy, I don't know, but that's a design seed that I've liked. Since I said I wanted these designs to stand out a bit more from the themes and mechanics of the set, I wanted them to feel like their own selves. Dragon is its own self, not really a product of environment around it. It's not concerned with the mechanics of lesser cards. I don't have any mechanics in these except for a couple cards, and this is one of them. Because in this set, anytime I want to put a +1/+1 counter on something, I ask myself, well, could this just be crystallize instead, since I have access to them? So this is a riff on Desecration Demon from Return to Ravnica. It was a demon that 6/6 flyer for 4, but an opponent could sacrifice a creature to make you tap it at the beginning of any combat. But if they did that, you got a counter on the demon. So you could put it off for a long time, but then it gets bigger and better the more. So a very interesting ratcheting of tension, and also introduces more agency to the game, which I'm all about. One issue with Desecration Demon, when I'd play against it, they'd play it first combat. They'd say, do you want to sacrifice a creature? And I'm like, why would I want to do that? It has summoning sickness. But it's technically a May trigger that comes up the first time you play it. So I like pairing it with haste to make it an immediate decision, and there's that weird trigger window. Both players get a little bit, I guess you could do that, but why would you do that? And then instead of putting a +1/+1 counter on it, crystallize. That becomes interesting because you don't have to put the counter on this dragon. Put it on something else. So choosing to sacrifice something to stop this dragon still lets you either improve a different attacker or give yourself a treasure token to cast, like to ramp into something on the next turn, or give you some fixing. Um, it becomes a very tricky proposition for an opponent. Like they're giving you a lot of options by sacrificing a creature. So I like that design. Land Claimer. So this is kind of new space for black and red. One thing that I've been playing against and with a lot in the custom standard format, the format we use where it's all custom sets, is land destruction. And land destruction feels awful. It's not fun to play against. One thing that helps with many similar types of designs, white removal spells and things like that, is there's usually a way to answer the answer. And I think particularly when you're coming to one of the most crucial resources of the game, hands, there being an answer for the answer seems important to me. And so I wanted to use Vanishing Light approach to land destruction here. This might just be too toxic. I don't know. You can't flicker to abuse this because the land that destroys will back. Unless you're doing it to yourself, I guess, and you have some free way to flicker it. I don't know. Maybe that's a weird combo. Really core to the. This is land destruction. I did want to get away from that kind of resource denial set generally. But if there's a time I want to do more destruction in a set, I think this would be an interesting approach to it. Okay, that was dragon number 6. Dragon number 7. We're going at a fairly okay pace, maybe a little slow, so I'm going to try and speed things up. Blue-green, what do blue and green like to do? They like flash. That's often a blue archetype. This dragon lets you cast things with flash, any of your things. But the green side allows you to also play lands as if they have flash, in a sense. You can still only play one land a turn. You got to do it on their upkeep, and you have to have the land in your hand. I notably did not give this flash because I think you have a card that basically turns everything on in your deck to instant speed. You need to invest a little bit to gain that advantage. You have to cast it at sorcery. That was my thinking there. This is so this is the green, and that's the blue of the Chinese menu approach. So dragon number 6, 7, 8. Oh, I hope this is big enough for you guys. Yeah, it's fairly big. So with this one, blue and green, they both like to do gating, where you have to return creatures or permanents to your hand. This just gives you value for it. And considering you're both returning cards to your hand and gaining value, hand size is often a thing. So this just lets break that rule. And rule breaking, I think, is a part of play your way philosophy I'm for. So just a big dumb value. Blue green rare. Heaven knows we need more of those. And the third one, something weird. Divination Maker. Because guess what it does? It makes divination. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, to make it a little green, Also make your land drops interesting. Typical good landfall gameplay. Um, you create a sorcery card. I loved when they came up with the create keyword for creating tokens around the same time as Kaladesh because it really shortened the text you had to put on cards, gave you a little more space, but it also made me wonder what could you create other than a token? I think this is an instance of that, that this might be the time you would use the create keyword if your wizard proposed. So you create a sorcery card named Divination, then you spell out what it does. These would have to be token-like cards that come in the set. Um, I really like this tech. I think it's very interesting. However, since it requires specific tech, it probably wants to be part of a major mechanic of the set, and this probably feels a little too alien to Karsus. I don't know. All right, those are blue-green. Let me know which ones you like the most or any ideas inspired by those, or which ones you think I should explore. Green and white. I had a hard time with green and white, not typically big dragony colors, and they also overlap a lot. They tend to do very similar things when you put together, always mid-rangey, tokeny, aggro stuff. So here, this is, what does green do? It can have hexproof, and white do can give you hexproof, usually not permanently. This uses the tech from Ikoria of counters. I like the idea of putting counters on players. Keyword counter that would make sense to have on a player. That's good. It's essentially just an emblem that says you have hexproof. This is very big and splashy. Maybe it's more mythic than rare. I don't know. It's obviously not pushed for mythic power level. But that was my thinking there. It's just a big giant FU to counterplay, but it makes you feel very protected. So that's the approach there. This one I wanted to explore. Oh, this is also Chinese menu. This is not an overlap design. Well, I broke my own rules a few times, you'll notice, just when I had a hard time coming up with something for the different approaches. This one, I call it help opponent because these are effects that often will make someone, when evaluating cards, say, oh, this is crappy, you help your opponent more than yourself. Because when you do it, it gives advantage to both players, but they're the first ones who get to really take advantage of that instead of you because you spend all your mana giving them the advantage, essentially. It's a huge tempo loss, and it's very difficult to break mirrors. Yeah, to break parity with effects like this. I think it's fun for Johnny's to try and break parity with cards like this. So maybe there's still a good reason to have this. I don't know. But I just thought White's new card draw, where they make everybody draw a card, mixed with Green's occasional effect of just doubling all the mana for everybody, could be interesting. Give everybody more cards, everybody more opportunity to pass those cards. Probably more for just like a group hug thing, EDH, and should probably be costed and statted accordingly. I don't know. The third one, something new. Green and white, they're big on counters. And there are counters in this set because of Crystallize. And so I started coming up with this design where, like, maybe you put counters on yourself, but then they move to the dragon, and then you can distribute them to other people. And I realized what I was designing was just Ozolith on a stick, the artifact from Ikoria, where with all the keyword counters in Ikoria, creatures die with the counters, they go to the Ozolith and then distributes the keyword counter. I think it's a little more interesting if the Ozolith actually had a bot, because then you're redistributing them onto something that can use them. And then the question is, do I keep them there, or do I not really a choice on Ozolith other than which creature do I put everything on? Like, you always use it. Here, it's not as obvious because this thing already has evasions. Counters are distributing are +1/+1 counters, which they're most likely to be in Karsus. It might make sense to just keep them all piled on this dragon because it has evasion, but that's a very all-in approach also. It leaves you open to get blown out by removal. So maybe you want to distribute them among an army for a big alpha strike. Since there's so many dragons in the set, maybe even if you put all your counters on this dragon, there's a dragon that it can't attack into very well, and so it put it out. So I like this design, even though it's just an iteration and a rip-off of Ozolith. I changed it so you can distribute them among creatures instead of having to put them all on one creature. I think that makes more sense than the Ozolith approach. Okay, back. Had to help a kid real fast. So, yeah, that's that one. Which green, white dragon do you like the most? I am undecided. Not sure I super like any of them. Okay, red, green. These were a little more top down. Because the art I found that had crystally things, but also red, green colors had eggs. And I think um, I like distinguishing red green dragons that way. I think it makes sense that they're very territorial, care about growing and bringing up their dragons. This particular effect is basically just Atla Palani and how it makes it so when your eggs die, you polymorph essentially. Except here you polymorph for a dragon, which I like. There's tons of dragons in the set, so this should still be quite good and limited. And I like the randomness of this, but the fact that you're randomly getting a dragon means that it's still going to be pretty good. So that's that one. This is Egg Lord. Again with the eggs, big on the hatching theme here. You get 3 eggs this time, and then whenever an egg leaves, this zaps something or shocks something. And you can combine this with other eggs in the set or other eggs in Magic history. An Egg Lord, which is kind of fun. I don't know if I want art in this set that points to that kind of strategy or not. I don't know, but that's the design. I think it's an okay design. A lot of chumping here. This is actually fairly powerful if your opponent's trying to attack you at all, because you can chump them and then start dealing damage. Okay, the third one is kind of just a different variant of the Atla approach, except it has a lot uh, consistency to it. You pick exactly which dragon card you want, and it gets kind of exiled under the dragon tutor. Then when this dragon leaves, that dragon takes its place. Oh, it actually just goes to their hand. Oh, probably because I didn't want clicker shenanigans. But I did want this dragon to be in combat a lot more so that it's more likely to die. Likely. And so I give it vigilance. This is probably my least favorite of the 3 here, but I could see it working. I don't know. Okay, those are red, green, red, white. Dragon number 16. We're over halfway. Dragonheart, great movie from the 90s. Loved it as a kid. The idea is there's a dragon who does this ritual with a king's son, where because of the dragon's heart, he does a magical bond with this prince to save his life, such that anything that would happen to that prince would actually just harm the dragon instead. And they were kind of bonded in that way. And this guy had the strength or the vitality of a dragon, which made him almost impossible to kill. And I thought that that actually fits the red white as a color pair with kind of bonding, sharing of damage, retribution, which led me to this Palisade Giant design from Return to Ravnica. All damage that would be dealt to you as a player is instead dealt to this thing, the white intercessionary instinct. But then the red Boros Reckoner. If you deal this kind of damage to me, I'm going to hit you right back in the face. And so that combos in a very cool way, I think. They're both kind of rare level effects that have never been combined before. I don't think. I might be wrong on that. Um, maybe that becomes a little too easy. It's hard. It's easier to solve because the card solves itself in some ways. But then there's really funky things. So that's my Dragonheart design for red white. This was one of the few other crystallized designs. I like the occasional effect that white has, where they can return artifacts or permanents that left the battlefield that turn, and mixing that with red's occasional artifact recursion. And the fact that in this set, people are going to be sacrificing lots of treasure tokens, thought that was a nice combination as far as the Venn diagram approach. So this is definitely a Chinese menu approach. This is a Venn diagram approach. And since, I can't return cards if it's treasures because those are tokens, they don't graveyard, they can't be earned. I thought you would just crystallize and turn the artifacts that have been destroyed this turn into counters or treasure. So it works well with itself. You can cast this with treasure, and then when it enters the battlefield, get all the treasure back, and then maybe you cast another one. I don't know. Maybe some funky combos you can do here. Life Swing. This one, I want to do something different. When I think of difference, I think of different parts of the game that aren't often modified or changed because they affect the rules. And this was a line of text I haven't seen in official Wizard stuff very often. The difference between starting life total and your current life total. So that could mean you started at 20, you go down to 10 life, this number is 10. But if you started at 20 and you go up to 30 life, because all of the white life gain stuff, that number is also 10. And it becomes that big. Now, how is that read? Well, getting an advantage from your life total being very low can feel kind of red. I mean, it's also black, but it seems like a red thing as well. Kind of the recklessness of red. And the fact that giving this thing lifelink looks like a big advantage. It says, oh, if your life total is really low, this becomes really big and you gain all that life back. But because of this static effect, when you gain all that life back, this becomes a 0/0 no matter what. And it explodes and dies. So very impermanent permanent if you actually live out the dream of this card. But you do go back to your starting life total, which is kind of, you're right, and you've dealt a bunch of damage to them. Notably, this does not die if you're above your starting life total and you attack them. Then it just gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. So interesting design there, but a little bit weird to think about. It's probably unfortunate that in most cases that this would be used. It goes away. I don't think people want their dragons to be so temperate. All right, dragon number 19. We're heading into blue black. This was like the most boring first design I thought of when I was going to do two color rare dragons. I was like, oh my gosh, I could just do the most boring Dragon Ball-y ETB nonsense where it enters the battlefield and it does something the one color does or the other color. And that's what this is. Yeah, just kind of a pushed, very powerful ETB effect on something that's a dragon. Decks that want those as spells, but maybe also want bodies or maybe dragons, dragon tribal stuff. Not my favorite design. I think it is very boring. But maybe there are people out there who would like it, who'd love to use dragons to counter spells and kill stuff and still get it with the dragon's body. Okay, a space that blue and black share for the Venn diagram design is milling. There's not a lot of very specific mechanical things that blue and black share. There's like tutoring, there's caring about the library and card draw, but there's milling, and milling has been hard mechanic because if you have it in a set, you need a certain amount of it for it to actually be viable as a win condition, or you need graveyard synergies for it to be viable as something itself. And luckily, I've got both in this set. Also, recently, Wizards of the Coast have changed things such that you can just say mills on the card, which gives you rules text space to do fun things like whenever a player mills one of their cards. Instead of saying whenever a player puts one or more cards on the top of their library graveyard, uh, create an XX Black Shade creature token with flying, where X is the number of cards put in your graveyard and milled. So this is already a lot of cards, but imagine, I mean, that adds like at least two more lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I kind of don't think any card should be more than 7 lines. There's a very specific reason. Anyway, so this cares about milling. You can wait until it mills on your turn. This, I think, is the way you would keyword the grind effect from Gate Crash that the Dimir Guild had as a sub theme in that set. Not sure, maybe it would be different, but I've always thought that was fun, milling a variable amount. Then you start counting the land. their graveyard, and it gets you strategizing how many more times you need to do it. So I like this. This is kind of its own win condition, but also it's giving you some board presence, which is important in many mill designs because milling too often does absolutely nothing until it wins. So getting some board presence, caring about this variable number, I think is a fun. Okay, Parallel Thoughts was an old card from old Magic where you'd exile your library and you'd put a certain number of cards from your library and it would be your library. Like you basically change your library for just certain cards from your deck, but you reshuffled them. It was kind of a weird. This basically does that, except it doesn't replace your library. It has to be dragon cards. It has to be 4 dragon cards. So you have to have a 4 dragon card sideboard, and you shuffle them to a face down pile. Anytime you would draw a card, you can draw from the dragon pile because you know what dragons are in there. You don't know exactly which one you're going to get. This does have information complexity in the opponent. You have to reveal that they're dragon cards before you make the pile. Otherwise, it's cheating. Sometimes you don't want to draw from there because you actually want lands or you need to draw a removal spell. Figure in a set that has so many dragons. Might be an interesting toolbox thing. Casual R or Solian on Discord. I'm not sure exactly how they prefer to be referred to. They had the idea of maybe whenever you cast a dragon card, you can cast the top card of your dragon pile for free. That'd be a little more dragon tribally. And blue-black is not a dragon tribal color, the set, but it would be an interesting. Okay, we're going on to blue-red. Dragon 22 of 30. This is very simple. It's a clone, except it's also a dragon. So you can clone anything on the field, except it's also a dragon. Base power and toughness 4/4, has flying and fire breathing. This might be like too good. You have to have another creature on the battlefield. Like too often, this is just a 4/4 flying for fire breathing. And then the upside is also tremendous. If there's anything with great ETB, like, oh, I want that ETB and a dragon for 4 mana. It's just very, very powerful. I could see this being 5 mana. But that's the first one. Okay, second one. Well, I say this is the second one, but I skipped it because usually the third one is the innovative one. This is not innovative. This is just shared space Venn diagram approach, whereas the clone is an Chinese menu approach. I'm often surprised by how powerful this ability is. I was like, well, what if you did that on a huge dragon, where sometimes it's impossible to kill, other times it's just incredibly powerful, but it can't be both at the same time. So you have to time things specifically. In the case of this card, you have to turn on this ability by casting a spell. But if it's an instant, kind of blow out an opponent if they don't think they're able to stop the dragon. It's hard to punish it because then once you've activated this ability, they then try and remove it, you just switch back. Is that a super fun way to play? I don't know. I think online this would be quite annoying once you've cast a spell because it would be like, oh, do you want to switch power and toughness now? No. Do you want to do it now? No. So maybe not the kind of card Wizards would print these days. All right. So this should really be the third one because this is the weird space. I told you how much I like exploring different uses for the term create. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to care about creating? So this very often reads whenever a creature token enters the battlefield. But, in the case where there might be other sets where you create things other than tokens, such as with the Divination Maker, right, where you're creating actual cards, it's interesting to care about the trigger by itself. And we do create things with the crystallized mechanic. Oftentimes we create these treasures. And so this is just to make it a blue-red thing, with respect to Niv Mizzet here, we can either draw a card or deal damage. So I kind of like this. Maybe there's a more elegant or interesting way to care about the creation trigger. I have probably a better set for it, but I like that. So that's the third blue-red dragon. Dragon 25 are coming to the home stretch. We have 6 dragons left. Black white, this is the only one that has double white and double black. That's because it's a huge thing with an enormous ETB ability. And considering all the treasure in this set, I didn't want back to that swinging to be so easily splat. And I also want players to read this cost and read this ability and think, oh, so I need to cheat this into play. It's a very like Angel of Serenity or Ashen Persecutor, Ashen Rider, I think it's called. Anyway, um, this is the Chinese menu, but in a way, in diagrammy way, black and white both make opponents sacrifice things. White usually has both players do it, but they will they have like balance effects and things like that. Making opponents sacrifice artifacts or enchantments is something that white can do. Lands and discarding something black can. Making them sacrifice creatures, white does that sometimes with cards like I forget what it's called, but they have to sacrifice an attacking or blocking creature. So, pairing all those things, it's a very spicy toolbox target. Something in custom standard lately is there aren't super overwhelmingly obviously good reanimator targets. So I want it, if I'm making all these dragons, I want at least one of them to feel like a great thing to reanimate. That's that. Speaking of reanimation, here is the shared space, which is reanimation. I said I didn't want to do sub themes from the set, but one of the themes in this set is enchantments, and it's not super obvious theme. Black and white come up enough and limited yet. I'm still obviously working on the set quite a bit. So maybe having a rare in those colors make it really obvious what's going on with your enchantments is probably good. I have this other mechanic other than crystallize in Karsus. It's called rifts, and I'm going to show it to you momentarily. So I showed you. Okay. So there's an example of a rift. It's basically an enchantment that when it enters play, you get an ETB effect, so like casting a spell, and then can crew your enchantment to get the spell effect again. Enchantment goes to your graveyard. So black-white cares about enchantments entering play, having them, but also returning them from your graveyard because it's much easier to get your enchantments to your yard in this set in a way that's not just the typical, oh, put auras on your guys, and then it's okay that you wasted a card on an aura because you might get it back later. So even though you were 2-for-1, we can get that back to a 2-for-2 with this other card. So I like that approach. All right, now let's hide that one. No. Okay. Go back to that. I'm sorry. Okay. So just constantly reanimating those grifts can give you a lot of value, and that's what that guy does. Okay, this is something weird. This is a mechanic that I once keyworded, but it wasn't great as a keyword mechanic. I think it's better for like an individual rare. That's basically the opposite of evolve. Creature gets bigger, but only if you cast things weaker than it. I called it rule. I put it in black and white, and the flavor was kind of like classic monarchy, city leader, but also secret society with like the different circles or the pyramid scheme type growth within an organization, where you get, you advance the more people under you there are. And so I decided that might be interesting. Like I said earlier, anytime I put counters on something, which is what Rule did, why not have it be crystallized instead? The obvious play pattern with something like this is, oh, well, whenever this triggers, I'll just make this bigger so that it's easier to trigger it in the future. And it just really snowballs out, which makes it a very difficult mechanic to design for, which is what keyword mechanic I've actually ever used. But I do want to try it on a one-off rare design. Having it be on a flying dragon, you notice how I have this as a 3/4, whereas most other dragons are at least a 4/4. That's kind of lame, but I have to do it that way to make the hoop of first casting something weaker than this to get the ball rolling feel like you've actually accomplished something and not just simply, oh, just cast this creature you draw. Uh, and so having a 3/4 dragon is still great, but I can cost it accordingly. The art doesn't really match a tiny dragon that gets bigger. I don't know. But yeah, so the obvious play pattern, you put counters on the flying thing, which then gets even bigger. Are your counters going to be better on anything other than something that flies? And also, the bigger it gets, the easier it is to get even bigger. Probably not the correct design for this idea. Something that might be interesting to try. I figured maybe with more options, being able to put the counter not just on it, but on these other weak things that you're playing to give them more value. Or if you need mana, getting the treasure instead. Maybe that makes it so that the obvious play pattern I mentioned before isn't always the correct thing. Worried that it would be anyway. So that's ruler. Those are black and white. Um, my favorite of these, I don't know. I think they all have their pluses and minuses. Blue and white. All of these designs I basically talked through with Casual Art, aka Solian, aka whatever they're going by, Discord. Um, speaking of these blue-white ones. And this is the Chinese menu, flash flying, caring about your opponent's tapped creatures. There's a tap on tap theme in the set, so this has a little more play to it. Gaining life, drawing cards, the typical blue-white combination, classic. Those effects combo well together, and then you also have a big dragon. That's wonderful. You can eat something they're attacking with, probably. So you get a lot of value from it. It matches a lot of blue-white play patterns. I wanted to make a control finisher among these dragons. If I'm going to have 10 rare slots in the set that are all big flyers and none of them be control finishers, that would seem a waste. And blue-white seemed like a good spot to experiment with that. Um, control finishers, as Casual R broke down for me, they typically do 3 different things. And they have evasion. They have they're good at ending the game. They have protection. They're good at protecting themselves. That you can kind of rely on it for you. Then third is I think they stabilize. Forget what the third thing was that he said. But that's something that you notice from some control finishers is they're good at putting the game away either through winning or through like gaining you a bunch of life so aggro burn decks know that the game is over. Um, recently there's a Sphinx in Theros Beyond Death that does all those things and it's going to win every game. It also gives you card advantage. This I thought was a more interesting. I think this is more interesting, right? Because it uses the white everybody draws mechanic, but also gives you ways to discard the cards that you draw. So, like, it helps you draw cards, and you can then use those cards for things, but it doesn't give you card advantage necessarily. And you can flicker this to also do a loot if you really need to, which I think is interesting, although you are giving your opponents cards at the same time. So, buyer beware there. But this can help you stabilize if needed. It has some play to it if you're on the other side of the table. When they play it, you're like, oh crap, they're playing this finisher. Well, at least I also get a card. I know I have a card in this deck that can help me deal with it. Every time that they have to protect their dragon, flicker it until an end step. That helps me dig a little bit further to try and find the answer for it. If you're really worried about them gaining all this life, you can try and remove it first, and then when they flicker it, once it's removed, then you can hit them with the burn spells. Um, and the counterplay to that is when you know they're removing it so that they can burn you, maybe you discard a bunch of cards to gain life while you can, and then flicker. So I can see the sub games around this card being pretty interesting. I like that it asks that the control deck has other ways of getting card advantage. Because control deck should be able to do that. And I don't like when the finisher basically does everything the deck wants. Yeah, I think this is a promising design. I like it a lot. Okay, third, something new that blue and white does. Something I've been experimenting with is the banishing light effect, exile, blah, 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 until this leaves the battlefield. And I thought, what else could you put there instead of leaves the battlefield? Exile, blah, blah, blah. There's, flickery things like exile it until the beginning of the next end step, exile it, and then immediately return it. I thought exile it until that player draws a card, so you could exile it on top of their library, and then they know it comes back when they would draw a card because it's them drawing a card. Although I couldn't think of a reason to use that, because you might as well just wait till the end of the turn because everybody draws a card at the beginning of the turn. So whatever. Um, but I really do like the banishing light play pattern of I remove your thing, but there's still counterplay for you. And in this case, I wanted a different kind of counterplay. And so the flavor here, and I'd probably want different art and a specific name, is that a dragon kidnaps a creature, or in this case, a spell, magical spell. And if the player wants it back, they have to answer a riddle. Now, they can only answer the riddle if the dragon is still around to tell them they're correct or not. So if they remove the dragon, their thing's exiled forever. Now, this is the text I'm least sure of here. It's how they answer the riddle. I decided something that is fair to ask of decks is that they have a bunch of different card types in their graveyard. So the delirium batch, right? 4 or more card types. And that's not unreasonable to ask. I think most decks at least have that somehow. And this leads to them, okay, I need to get this in my graveyard. Maybe that leads to them casting a sorcery they wouldn't otherwise cast, so that they can get this other card back that they find important for the game for whatever reason. One thing I worry about with this design is it uses a lot of words and splash for something that may not be that important. Like, how different is this if that doesn't exist at all? Like, is it not going to happen enough that an opponent will answer the riddle to the point that it might as well just remove a creature or spell forever, and then it's not that exciting anymore? It's only exciting when the opponent gets the card back, or if they remove this giant dragon that they're probably going to have to deal with one way or another, then they won't get the card back. So I don't know, but I like this idea of opponents having to answer a riddle and therefore getting the thing back that the dragon took. That's dragon number 30. 30 dragons. Let me know which designs you like. I'm probably just going to pick one of each color pair to throw into the next build of Karsus, regardless of if it's the set's needs, other needs or not, just to get some play of these rares, of these designs, and see how they do. Feel free to vote. I might put a vote thing up in the Discord channel or in the comments below. And if you have any ideas that spawn from these, you think, oh, tweak this card to do this instead, that makes it better, or it fixes this issue or that issue, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.